So continuing from last week, where we were discussing the problem of extreme skepticism and doubt, um, let's look at the problem again of the bubble of empiricism, where the empiricist assumes, without any evidence or proof, that his experiences somehow give him a magical access to reality. In equating experience and reality, he's making a huge and unwarranted leap. The irony is that many of the people who proceed in this irrational way think of themselves as following strictly along the pathways of reason. Their outlook can survive scrutiny only as long as they do not examine its foundations. Quote from D'Souza's book. So to recap, no one really lives by reason alone or believes only what they can prove, because generally you wouldn't be able to function. You go insane. Right, so the question arises then, is this us? Is that all there is? So are we nothing more than the result of atoms moving in our brain? So I think it was G.K. Chesterton that called it the thought that stops thought. So as the atheist scientist J.B.S. Haldane realized, if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true, and hence I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. So that's the catch-22. C.S. Lewis puts it similarly, if minds are wholly dependent on brains, and brains on biochemistry, and biochemistry in the long run on the meaningless flux of the atoms, I cannot understand how the thought of those minds should have any more significance than the sound of the wind in the trees. And his conclusion is, unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought. So I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Right? So if we look on the purely materialistic Darwinistic framework, what happens in our minds is only the result of selecting for fitness and survival. There's nothing about truth, right? There's nothing about correspondence to true reality. It's only what's useful, even if they're useful delusions, right? So again, radical skepticism and strict empiricism is self-defeating. And to recap again, materialism stops thought, if you really think about it. So most people don't go that far because it's, you can't live that way. And again, regarding the mind, science's biggest mystery is the nature of consciousness. It is not that we possess bad or imperfect theories of human awareness, a typo there. We simply have no such theories at all, says a physicist, Nick Herbert. A philosopher of mind, B. Alan Wallace, says, strictly speaking, at present there is no scientific evidence even for the existence of consciousness. So that may take a bit of thinking, but something to noodle. So we all live by faith most of the time. God is the ground of reason and reality, and there are really no workable alternatives to justifying that reason and reality actually are what we think they are, apart from God. And we're thinking about, well, which faith do we choose, right? We're all living by faith, so which faith is it? Well, don't wait too long. We have faith in any number of things. For example, that a sinkhole won't open right in front of us, or that while we're safe at home, not daring to drive, a plane would not crash into our home. In this case, 8 inches from the occupants. So the biblical framework is that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's in Proverbs 1, verse 7. And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, in Psalms 111, verse 10. Right? So without that knowledge of God, we really have no grounds on which to start trusting our minds. Regarding knowledge, gaining knowledge, experiencing the world, getting knowledge of the world, or wisdom. In the beginning was the Word, the Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was with God. John 1, verse 1. So God is the ordering principle behind the universe, the thing that makes sense of the universe. All right, makes it work. So again, class outline. Today we'll talk about the exclusivity of faith. If you recognize this picture, it's from Highlander, where the phrase "there can be only one." Anyway, if you know it. So Tim Keller quotes Blair, a 24-year-old in Manhattan, saying, "How could there be just one true faith? It's arrogant to say your religion is superior and try to convert everyone else to it. Surely all the religions are equally good and valid for meeting the needs of their particular followers." And here's another thought that's similar. Religious exclusivity is not just narrow, it's dangerous. Religion has led to untold strife, division, and conflict. It may be the greatest enemy of peace in the world. If Christians continue to insist that they have the truth, and if other religions do this as well, the world will never know peace. Right? Very, very common sentiment. So again, looking at the previous verse quote, what are the beliefs hidden behind these claims? Right? So remember, there are hidden beliefs, and here's the first one: only Christianity claims to be the one true faith. Now, it's not mentioned specifically in this quote, but it's a very common complaint. Here's another belief: there can't be just one truth. Saying so is arrogant. All religions are equally good and valid. Religion is the enemy of peace. So let's take a look. Let's examine these alternate sets of beliefs. Only Christianity claims to be the one true faith. Is that really true? Well, you can easily disprove this claim, right? There are many faiths that claim to be the one true faith. Atheism claims to be the one true faith. And remember, it's from what we saw before, everyone lives by faith. And they just have a set of alternate beliefs. This is the same for atheism as well. Agnosticism, right? The stronger form, which claims that you can't know if there is a God, which is different with the personal form. Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, right? There's Islam, right? What about the claim that there can't be just one truth? Well, we see this claim is self-defeating because, right, that's claiming to be to know that there can't be just one truth. How do we know that? We have no reason to accept that claim. What about saying so is arrogant? Saying that what I believe is the truth. We'll take a look at that. We kind of saw an answer to that. All religions are equally good and valid. Well, is that true? I mean, the people have complaints about jihad, right? The violent form of it, as opposed to the peaceful form. The Inquisition, for example, the Crusades, David Koresh, the Aztecs, the religion where they rip your heart out while you're still living. Applegate, another cult where people died, right? So are they all equally good and valid? That's kind of a strange claim. All major religions are equally valid. They all basically teach the same thing. Well, if we ask the leaders of these religions, would they agree with this? Well, I mean, there are things that are associated with what we call common grace. We have prohibitions against things like murder and theft, for example. So there's some commonality, which is good, but teach all the same thing? Well, I guess you could say they're all the same except for a few things, a few minor things. For example, God's existence and attributes. Oh, well, actually, it's kind of a big thing, isn't it? So, for example, Allah, the Quran teaches that Allah does not love sinners, right? Which is very different from the Christian God, which, we think is a good thing because then if he didn't love sinners, then no sinners could be saved. In Islam, for example, there at least in some forms of it, there's the thought that God is the final determiner of your fate. So even if you try your best, you try to follow all the laws, follow the rules, be a good person, in the end, Allah could decide, well, I don't really like you. You're going to hell. So, and for example, we have the question of, is God a Trinity or unity? Um, so these are some very important differences. There are some differences in the stories of origins. How are we saved? What is our final destiny, and how judgment will be accomplished, right? So a very important difference would be who is the person of Christ. Huge difference. And let's not forget, even the religions which we think of as more tolerant and peaceful. Buddhism arose as a reaction to Hinduism. Saying Hinduism, some aspects of it are just wrong. So, do they all teach the same thing? And of course, those two religions teach something very, very different from the what we call the Judeo-Christian religions. So, okay, so here's the other claim. And we know the story of the blind men who are experiencing an elephant, and all experiencing different parts of the elephant. So one thinks it's a fan because of the big ears, another thinks it's a spear because of the tusks, another touches the tail and says it's like a rope, and so forth. So the claim is each religion only sees part of the truth, not the whole truth. Interesting claim, right? It sounds like a very humble claim, very tolerant claim. So what can we agree with here? Again, we have similar moral codes to some degree, right? We may not know everything. We may not know all truth. For example, even in our own faith in Christianity, there's some things we still don't know. Things about the future, how that's going to play out. There's some different theories about how does salvation really work, freedom and so forth. So, free will versus predestination, how do you deal with that? So, there's still some mysteries. But the statement, each religion only sees part of the truth, not the whole truth, is it a humble view or is it something different? Well, the assumption behind that claim is really that the person saying that claims to see the whole truth, in fact, and to know more than all the other faiths. See, you may believe your own religion, but I know that you're only seeing part of it. You're not seeing the whole picture. I see the whole picture. So they may not realize it, but actually it's kind of a really, really arrogant claim, right? Again, most people who say this don't really think about the implications, but that's what it is. What about this claim? Religious belief is just cultural or historical conditioning. Oh, very interesting. Right? At first, it sounds very reasonable, and it's a very popular way of looking at religion. So all moral and spiritual beliefs are determined by social conditioning, the people around you, basically the community. No beliefs are universally true. It's just your own little pocket, right, where you are. And it's another way of saying all religions are equally false. Maybe not equally in a mathematical sense, but and so therefore, we cannot evaluate other beliefs because it's just social conditioning. What can we agree with here? Well, of course, we can believe that. We can agree that to a great extent, the beliefs that you have at first, are probably cultural or historical conditioning, right? Now, people do change and adopt other beliefs, and perhaps you can also say, well, that's because you change your community later on, who knows, or you hung around different people. Okay, well, what's the problem with this belief? Well, the problem is that we expect them. They expect us to believe that belief is different. It's this belief is not the result of cultural conditioning. Why isn't it? Why do you have special status? So this claim is in fact self-defeating. All religions are equally valid, so it's arrogant to insist your religion is right and try to convert others. Interesting. Well, what can we agree with here? Are all religions equally valid? I mean, of course, it's possible to be arrogant in trying to argue your cause. So it's certainly possible. It's something that we all have to try to avoid. We need to have some humility when we're examining questions, examining doubts, examining, and especially the questions of others, right? But what can we not agree with? Again, we looked at other religions, which things that they themselves would not agree with. But here's another question. Do most people in the world agree with the first claim, which is all religions are equally valid? Well, most people actually would not agree, right? This claim is actually a very, very Western take on the world. So is it arrogant or not? All religions are equally valid. How do you know that? I mean, if the proponents of their religions claim that other religions are not equally valid, which we saw just a little while ago, isn't it arrogant to claim that they're all wrong? What about this one? It is ethnocentric and therefore wrong to claim your beliefs are better. Well, let's ask again. Do most cultures believe this? No. If you went around the world, most cultures would say this is nonsense, right? And here's another problem. What culture believes ethnocentrism is wrong? So the sin of ethnocentrism is a Western concept. So you're actually imposing a Western concept on the rest of the world. So it's kind of, the tables are turned. So again, it is self-defeating. As historian C. John Somerville said, a religion can be judged only on the basis of another religion, which is another way of saying that we all have our own set of beliefs, and that's how we judge other beliefs. And this includes people who claim they don't have a set of other beliefs. So which is more narrow? Which makes exclusive claims to truth? My religion is right, or all religions are equal? Right? So they're equally narrow in a sense. Now, whether narrow is right or wrong, that's a different question, which we will examine later, right? So here's another claim. Religious exclusivity is not just narrow, it's dangerous. It leads to war, it leads to strife, it leads to all kinds of terrible things. So what can we do about this? Well, here's one thing that has been proposed, which is outlaw religion. Has it been tried? What were the results? Well, we can really see a hint in the picture. We might remember the results in the former Soviet Union, communist China, well, basically most communist countries, Nazi Germany, right? And the results in the modern era, at least 120 million dead, maybe even more. As Alistair McGrath says, the 20th century gave rise to one of the greatest and most distressing paradoxes of human history, that the greatest intolerance and violence of that century were practiced by those who believed that religion caused intolerance and violence. So something else happened instead. Now, wait a minute. You might say, wait a minute. Didn't Hitler believe in God? He mentioned God. He interacted with religious people and stuff like that. Well, here's the truth of it. Hitler at first used religion to manipulate the German people, but in reality he was deeply anti-Christian. So he was religious in a different way, some kind of occult paganism and so forth, but he really hated Christianity. He regards Christianity as a symptom of decay. Elsewhere, he said Christianity is an organized lie that must be smashed. The state must remain the absolute master. So if you're anti-church and anti-Christian, well, you have interesting company. You got to think about that. What's going on here? Again, Hitler complained it was only between the 6th and 8th centuries that Christianity was imposed upon our peoples. Our peoples had previously succeeded in living all right without this religion. So, again, the Nazis became increasingly anti-religious as the true nature of Nazism was revealed. They emphasized Darwinism in schools. They stopped celebrating Christmas. They thanked Hitler for blessings instead of God. They imprisoned and killed hundreds of clergy. They closed religious schools. They disbanded Christian organizations. They confiscated church property. They fired Christians from government. And they censored religious newspapers, and churches were under constant Gestapo surveillance. Huh. That's not something you hear every day. Wonder why. Why was Hitler so against Christianity? Well, we get some hint from Ernst Haeckel, Germany's father of evolution, who complained that the church, with its morality of love and charity, is an effete fraud, a perversion of the natural order. And what is the natural order? Of course, it's Darwinist belief that it's the strong that have to struggle and fight against the weaker to survive. Prominent evolutionist Sir Arthur Keith says Christianity makes no distinction of race or of color. Interesting. Even back then, they noted that. It seeks to break down all racial barriers. In this respect, the hand of Christianity is against that of nature. For are not the races of mankind the evolutionary harvest which nature has toiled through long ages to produce? May we not say, then, that Christianity is anti-evolutionary in its aim? Interesting. So it's terrible, right? And Christianity is trying to break down all racial barriers, and it's trying to be charitable and make no distinction of race. For Darwinists, that's not a good thing. But Arthur Keith puts a positive spin on it. Sorry for the typo down there. Because Germany has drunk the vat of evolution to its last dregs, and in her evolutionary debauch has plunged Europe into a bath of blood, that is no proof that the law of evolution is evil. Oh, okay. A law which brought man out of the jungle and made him king of beasts cannot be altogether bad. Well, yeah, we might differ on that. So, again, reminder, Jürgen Habermas is an important safety tip. Science cannot adjudicate morality or define good. So how about this claim? Keep your beliefs private, out of the public sphere. So that would mean only secular, non-religious moralities are allowed. Interesting. Non-religious moralities. Hitler would like that, I suppose. Do not allow legislation to be influenced by religious beliefs. Interesting. Does that work? Well, for thousands of years, the best philosophers in the world have struggled to define morality without reference to God, and so far it doesn't really work. We'll look at that later, but that does not work at all. So here's an odd question. Can Christianity save the world? What are the positive implications of these beliefs? We are all created in God's image. We are all sinners. Salvation is by grace, not by works. Interesting. So we are all created in God's image. What could that lead to? As Nietzsche said, another Christian concept no less crazy, the concept of equality of souls before God. This concept furnishes the prototype of all theories of equal rights. Right? We're all equal before God. We have to obey the same moral laws. We're all equally accountable. We're all sinners, right? Each of us has to choose God individually. So we have this equal accountability. Salvation is by grace, not by works. Again, this lets us lead a life which strives to be good, but is at the same time humble, right? Not considering ourselves to be better than other people. So we don't have any grounds to say, hey, I'm morally superior to you, that's why I deserve to go to heaven. So this lets us be gracious and humble at the same time. Again, the quote by Habermas: "The ideals of freedom of conscience, human rights, and democracy are the direct legacy of the Judaic ethic of justice and the Christian ethic of love. To this day, there is no alternative to it." Now, you keep in mind, he's not he's an agnostic. He's not a Christian, as far as I know. So keeping Christianity out of the public sphere. Well, they decided not to do that in ancient Rome. The Christians, instead, they welcomed the poor, the slaves, women, people who were marginalized. They did not despise but tended to the poor, no matter what their faith, right? Whether they were Christians or not, they tended to them. There was more status and equality for women in the church. Christians cared for the sick and dying, even sacrificially. During the great plagues of Rome, they stayed behind to care for the sick and dying. It is estimated that I think it was they reduced the mortality rate by 30%, something like that. I have to look that up. They imposed infanticide, the practice of exposing unwanted infants, especially girls, to leave them to die. Right. So why did this exclusive belief lead to all this? So Christians had within their belief system the strongest possible resource for practicing sacrificial service, generosity, and peacemaking. See, so as Keller says, at the very heart of their view of reality was a man who died for his enemies, praying for their forgiveness. So this allowed them to lead a radically different life, right? Isn't that something we want? Is Christianity exclusive? Well, Christianity has some exclusives. Unlike a lot of other religions, it gives us a lot of information about, really, from the origins of the universe and ourselves to where we are today. Why we know there's a moral standard, but we keep falling short of it, and we know we're falling short of it, right? It tells us how we can be saved and be rescued from a works-based identity, having identity based in something healthy rather than something fleeting. And also tells us a lot about our future. Okay, so the takeaway: all critiques of religious exclusivity are actually, okay, so let's look at these, are actually religious, right? They're a set of alternate beliefs. All religions are the same claims most people don't understand their own religion. All religions only see part of the truth claims a superior and unprovable knowledge. Attempts to exclude religions have been more disastrous. Christianity's exclusive beliefs may be the best chance for humility, tolerance, sacrificial service, and peace. And that's it for today.